Hi, Team IE. It's Elisa Stampf, CEO and co-founder of Ensure Quality. We're entering year two, and we're going to start doubling down on your story, your voice. Doing that, we're going to have little segments called Come As You Are, where you can talk about whatever it is going on in your world. We're chunking out the year in themes, and September of 2022 is toxicity and fear in the workplace. It's also about navigating, and that's a big part of it. So to kick us off is the one and only Sarah Muniz, author of Undiscovered Voices. She's also a board member, one of our first, and I'm so excited to share this with all of you. Sarah, the reason that you and I are both here doing what we're doing is because of fear and toxicity in the workplace. You and I met during some pretty dark times, shared a lot of dark details, and found community and people around us that got us here. But let's dig deep into that dark topic for a minute because I know it doesn't just impact you and I. So I'm going to start with, what is your experience with toxicity and fear in the workplace, specifically with insurance?
So it has taken me a really long time to find a positive place to work that doesn't use fear or use gaslighting or use I don't even know, like trying to think of like use weight like intimidation or belittling in order to try to motivate. Because for me personally, I'm not motivated by fear and intimidation. In fact, it does the exact opposite for me. It makes me go into this isolation mode. And I actually, I didn't realize this, but a lot of like we talk about fight or flight. And through years of therapy, I found out that there's other things in between what happens when you're having trauma related responses. And the one of the responses is freezing. I'm a
Mm,
freezer. And what freezing is that you stop functioning. So you're not you're not running away from the problem like flight. You're not fighting with anyone to try to solve the problem or change the problem. Or fist fighting is really what fight means. Instead, what you do is you stop functioning. And
mm,
that's what I've done. So that's what I do whenever I'm told that, like I'm not good enough or I'm going to get fired every time I turn around. Like one particular place that I worked at that I wrote about in my book, their entire management style was fear-based.
mm,
Like every Monday morning, we had a meeting where they basically told us that it was time to solve all the problems from the previous week and start fresh, and that we could all basically yell at each other, and they'd encourage yelling as a way to problem solve. And they're like, whatever happens in this room, this hour and a half, it stays in this room, and nothing negative happens from it, only positivity. What really happened was it gave the green light for managers and higher ups to talk down to the employees without feeling like they could get repercussions for it. And then as an employee, if you try to defend yourself, you would basically be told that you're fired. You're going to be fired,
mm.
or that you need to shut your mouth type thing. So I'm like, this is what they said that they were doing. Like, I don't know. I had never felt really comfortable with the idea of encouraging people to have conflict in the workplace to begin with. I don't feel like it, even if you say it stays in this room, it doesn't stay in the room. Our feelings move from room to room. It moves from, your life into your work. Like we try to make all these segments for ourselves. But at the end of the day, your feelings are your feelings and you're going to feel them no matter if you've walked out of a room and told to leave them behind or not. And if people are making you feel like every single Monday morning you could be fired just for looking the wrong way at a meeting or not having the right reaction, or maybe your face turns red and you shut down. And for me, like I just didn't talk. I didn't talk at those meetings, and my anxiety level before those meetings was so sky high. And it was Monday morning, so it was the start of my week.
Mm.
So I would just be like, oh my gosh, they're going to tell me how much I suck, how terrible I am at my job, and then how am I supposed to function well in my job? Because they never told me how to do my job. They just told me how much I suck at it. and how terrible I am and how I should just be just incredibly thankful that they would even give someone as dumb as me an opportunity. So it did not give them any productivity. I think people, and I'm not just like talking about me because I saw other people doing it too. I think we were so busy licking our wounds after those meetings and trying to pull ourselves back up to even be able to function that we weren't functioning. We were not productive. I didn't produce anything while I worked for that company because I didn't have the capability of producing, not just because of lack of trying or training. It was because I didn't have, like, they took any kind of confidence that I could possibly have and just squashed it. And I felt so down and terrible about myself. I mean, I literally, a couple months into working at that particular place, I think it was like 90 days in, I was so depressed, and I was just after talking to my counselor, she's like, you got to find a new job. I don't care where you work. You have to get out of this place because you're only going to get worse as long as you work here. You got to find somewhere that you can pull out of this stuck mode, this freeze mode, to where I couldn't even function as a person.
Yeah, you mentioned it's paralyzing. I mean, we talk about freeze as a response, and you're absolutely right, but it is paralyzing. And thank you for sharing that. I know you and I have talked at length about some of these stories, the ones that we carry with us, and it doesn't lose the impact or the bite every time we say it. It's hard to talk about, and it's hard to relive those moments and say them again. So thank you for doing that, because as we both know, we're not the only two that live them. There were all of those people in the office with you, and you've had multiple jobs. I guess what people would be thinking about in this moment, hearing you and hearing that you've moved on and you've been able to get out, what saved you in those moments? What propelled you to get out of those situations? You mentioned your therapist as a catalyst. Were there other people around you?
So my husband, so this was not the first time I had a depressive episode, and I was putting too much of my self-worth into my work. So whenever I wasn't doing well at work, I decided I wasn't a worthwhile human being, and I kind of like would go down this really dark rabbit hole. I had really dark times in 2016, and it was employment based dark times, but I've learned that there's some other things going on inside of me as well that I've been learning how to figure out what is the real response from, and then what triggers it. So that I've been able to learn along the way with a lot of help. But 2018 was really the catalyst for, and that was before I worked for the employer I was telling you about. But 2018 was the catalyst. Like I hit my rock bottom, and I hadn't ever seen a therapist on a regular basis, but that was when I started going into therapy and actually taking it seriously, because I had to. My whole life was in jeopardy if I didn't. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So, it does, absolutely.
So my husband's really supportive of if I'm in this freezing mode, like if I can't function, especially because 2018 scared him so much, and it scared me, quite frankly, so much too, that he's like, whatever your therapist says and whatever you need to do to get out of this stuck mode and become my wife and mother to my kids again, and be happy. He was like, you just need to do it. And so really it was a need, like I have built a relationship. At that point, it was like 2020 when I had that conversation with my therapist and when I quit that job. But I just learned to like just trust her, and she's telling me that you got to go find somewhere else to work, otherwise you're just going to get worse. I believed her, and we actually like walked through what a new employer needs to look like. And then I have to say it's extremely difficult interviewing for jobs and seeming like you're the best candidate when you're extremely depressed. So that was not an easy time for me either.
No.
But there is light. There is, help out there. I think that's the main thing. There's help. there's support systems around most people. And, some people's cases may not be as extreme as what I've gone through, because I probably needed to be seeing a therapist like way before 2018. I just didn't have that deep, dark place that I had to get out of that forced me into it, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Everything you're saying makes sense, and I know that I can feel it because again, we've talked about these before. You've been a huge champion for mental health. I know it's something that you and I talk about a lot. It's something we talk about in the IE community. You've been able to talk about that narrative a lot. It's actually the most talked about topic in the community itself. And in these situations, what you end up doing, you've alluded to it and we'll double down on it. You end up just trying to avoid punishment rather than actually doing your job or licking your wounds, as you said. How because it's difficult. You mentioned it's very hard to move, to do anything. Even if you're not somebody that's a freezer, it's very difficult to move out of that space and out of that mindset. How can someone recognize or start to see signs that they're working in a toxic work environment or something that's fear-based? What were some things that your counselor noticed or your therapist noticed, or maybe that you noticed in the workplace that would have been a good signal for somebody else or for you, even after that?
Yeah, I think that encouraging conflict, there's a difference between problem solving and encouraging any kind of conflict is absolutely, and that's an extreme case of toxic workplace. Like that's probably the most toxic workplace I've ever worked at. But really, like trusting your gut and knowing, like we know in our gut what's right and what's wrong, what's uncomfortable. And when you feel that ickiness, I mean, that's your first sign usually. And it's usually something like a microaggression,
Mm,
where someone's kind of like, might be like that dress doesn't look as good on you as the dress did yesterday. And maybe they're making a comment about your weight or making a comment about how attractive you are. That's like a small thing that you can take, negatively or positively, but it's really like a back-ended compliment. Like things like that can turn. Things like someone telling you that you can't have a holiday off. This is something that's happened to me because you're not that faith, or because you don't have enough time off to take for your own faith to take a holiday off, and then making you feel bad about it. And then there's other, like your manager or people who just don't care about what your thoughts are or opinions are. Like if you come into your manager's office and you're like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I want to talk. They're like, you know what, I really don't have time for you. Schedule an appointment. And then you schedule an appointment to talk to them. And then they're still working while you're trying to get whatever is on your chest. And then I had this happen to me where I told HR about an issue at one particular employer, and they didn't get me an answer back for 2 weeks. And then the answer was from my boss telling me that I should have never gone to HR and that I ruined my career. So
mm,
I think these are all extreme cases probably, but they're things that have happened at 4 or 5 different places I've worked at. So it's not even like it's happened at the same place.
yeah.
It's been, some worse than others. But if any of it is in that spectrum of, if you feel uncomfortable to talk to your manager or higher ups, if you feel like they're going to use information against you, if you, don't trust the people around you, like you kind of like, sometimes there's like competition, like friendly competition is one thing, and that's great. But when it becomes a competition that someone else is just trying to push you out of the way, like make you feel bad about how well you're doing. I don't know if that makes sense. But I
Yeah.
just think there's so many signs, and I think we feel it before it gets really bad. Like you can feel it, and if you can't talk to somebody and resolve whatever's going on, if you're not comfortable talking to higher ups, you're probably not in a safe workplace.
I think that's great advice and something that we've talked about at length before as well as retaliation. that's a big hallmark of a really toxic or a fear-based work environment. Anytime it's like, this will happen to you if you don't do this, or I will make sure that you can never work in insurance again.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, it's that same kind of calling card that we've noticed, and I know you've noticed too. You wrote a whole chapter about this in your book, if I remember correctly. Do you
Yes.
want to talk about your book a little bit and maybe reference that chapter?
Yeah, so I wrote about mental health in the workplace, and it actually came from when I originally was writing the book. I just had a paragraph about how mental health has really affected me and my work and my career for the in a negative way based off of where I'm working. So if I'm feeling good about myself and I have a positive environment and positive self-worth, I basically can be the top producer at any insurance company, and I have. But when I get deflated by someone or I'm feeling scared or fearful, I actually go opposite and I become the worst employee that you have because I can't function. And a lot of people around me, I've seen other people do that too, where they can't function. So that, like, now you're deemed as this low producing person, but in reality, you're because they're using fear to try to, you know, um, motivate you. It's a demotivator. It's not, and sometimes, like for some people, it may be like it may motivate in very short spurts, but what happens is it leads to so many health issues. So I really wanted to, I was told when I wrote just a paragraph about it, my editor was like, you got to write a whole chapter. This is important enough to actually write a whole chapter about. And unfortunately, it tends to be women tend to get the brunt of mistreatment in the workplace. Um, I don't know why, but we do. And it's really hard. And so I talked about the health issues that come with it too, like someone being overworked. Being overworked is being mistreated in the workplace. If you're doing three people's jobs when you're really supposed to do one person's job, and if you're working 60 hours instead of 40 hours, and now you're neglecting your own health, and you're so stressed out that you have IBS issues, it leads to heart issues. I mean, there's so many oh my gosh, where's it, like an ulcer? I was like, what's it called?
Yeah.
Like ulcers are stress induced health issues. And at the end of the day, like sometimes we put so much worth on how much money we're bringing into our household, but how much are you losing if you lose your health? Like your health is wealth. It's the number
Yeah.
one piece of wealth that we all have. And so finding that, like, don't give your health to an employer. They don't care. They're going to replace you. At the end of the day, to me, they don't care if something happens to you. The people you love care about what happens to you, and they care about your health. But if you got hit by a bus or you had a heart attack, they would be sad. They'd send you flowers to your family, and then they would hire someone else to replace you. That's just the reality. And so why do we give so much of ourselves to an employer who sees us as a number, as replaceable, in that
Absolutely.
it could care less whether they give us an ulcer because they're
Yeah.
stressing.
I love that line. Don't give your health to an employer. I think that's a really great line. It's something to think about because you're right. It's not just the mental and emotional weight that you carry with you from room to room, as you referenced earlier. It's the physicalness. And then it becomes a cognitive bias of imposter syndrome. We've talked about imposter syndrome before, and that impacts women pretty heavily as well. I know you wrote about that in your book. And where can people find this book if they want to read more of what you're talking about here or learn more about what you're talking about at length on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon, so it's very easy to find. I think we all have that smiley box on our phones. But literally, you just put in Undiscovered Voices. I'm the first one that pops up. I could have a picture of a lock, actually have a,
Yeah,
you
let's
know,
show it off.
there.
Yeah, there it is.
So it's real easy to find. You can actually just put in my name too, and I'm the only Sarah Muniz author that pops up. So it's
That's
really easy
awesome.
to find on Amazon. Of course, I'm available on LinkedIn too. I do write little snack size pieces in LinkedIn, but it's not enough to really dig into what's going on. And most of the personal stories in the book I don't share on LinkedIn because they all have aliases and they're all private, except for my personal stories, because obviously I can't keep my own
I can appreciate that. And if you want more of Sarah beyond that, Sarah is one of our board members at Ensure Equality. We're so glad that you're with us. And you can reference the mental health panel that you did for us in August. That is up on the resources page. So please find Sarah on LinkedIn, check out the book Undiscovered Voices, and let us know at IE if you'd like to get in touch. I hope you enjoyed the very first segment of Come As You Are. There are so many more stories, people, voices in and outside of insurance that have yet to make a debut. Please honor them in your space, check out their work, and follow IE for more. Until then, your story, your voice, your industry changed by you.